Welcome back to the Freedom Podcast with me, Josh, and Pastor G is back. We are here talking this week all about
Come on,
energy.
Josh.
Come on, we're back for another episode. And it's been amazing, actually, seeing about how this has gone out around the world and just been helping encourage people in their faith, perhaps connecting people in a greater way to the vision, to yourself, G. So I'm excited to be bringing another episode today. And we're going to be talking all about today relevant to our time, because we as a church, this is one of our core principles, our values. And I think about, G, all the ways that you have kept it relevant over the years. You as a leader have strove to being intentional around making church relevant. But I know that didn't happen overnight, that was something that you really worked on and got a vision for. Do you want to just give us a bit of insight into like what relevance is and about why it matters to you and why it's important for our church?
Yeah, well, in the dictionary, if you look in the dictionary, you've got the word relevance is right next to relic. And I think there's something very powerful that stands out is that when you stop becoming relevant, you become a relic, something that's really in the past. And I think for the church, this is the big question for us all is that, if we cease to become relevant to our time, to our generation that we're in, we're just a relic. And we can still meet and have church. We can still meet and, sing our songs. But if we're just inside four walls doing that, what really is the point of that? And I think that was impressed on me when we started doing church in the early years, because I'd come from perhaps a traditional background. And that traditional background that I came from, there was once a time where there was like hundreds of kids in the Sunday school I went to. Today, there isn't one. It's like ceased to be. And they were relevant for a time, perhaps 40, 50 years ago, there was a relevance and they impacted community. But because somehow they got stuck, and it's so funny because we can be relevant in the 90s as a church, but
Yeah.
if you don't continue to be aware of what's happening in the world and how the church, connects to the world, we're going to end up really out of date. And straight away, you start losing. I think you start losing the young people, the young families, because you have to be relevant. And so that for me and H was such a key thing when we started. Not that we had all the answers. I think we did things we look back on now and we think, wow, that really wasn't relevant. But I think we were aware that if we didn't pursue relevance as a church, that we would end up really dying out pretty soon. And that was something that was at the top of our list, was we want to build relevant church, not just a great club for the 1980s or the 1990s, but something that was almost, it's going to be alive, it's going to be living, it's going to be ever changing, so that it can make that message that it has to the world relevant so that people can connect to it.
Absolutely. And I think that when we think about relevance, it's all about saying we want to take this ageless message. The gospel is enduringly powerful from generation to generation. Doesn't matter what culture, it doesn't matter what country, it doesn't matter what age you are. This connects to our deepest human need. We connect with our maker.
Yes.
It's important, but there are so many things that get in the way of that gospel connecting. And it's like, for us, we want to make sure that it's relating. That's what it means, isn't it? It's relating to. It's that it makes sense, that it connects to. We know that the gospel is relevant. It just is, because we've done church all over the world, all different cultures. But there is something around the way that we present church that's the important factor. It's the message is ageless and it will never change, and we're uncompromising about that message. We're not going to be swayed by culture. We're not going to be swayed by what's popular with this generation. We're going to hold on to that biblical truth. However, the way that we showcase it, it's almost like having the same gift for thousands of years, but you change the packaging, you change the box that
Exactly.
it is, you change the wrapping, you put different ribbon on it, what's going to appeal and what's going to connect. When they open it, it's still the exact same gift
Yeah.
inside, but we're always going to present this gospel gift because we know it's relevant. We don't need to change anything about the message. It's always going to reach people. But through religion, through tradition, through preference, we can start to shape the packaging through our own experience rather than thinking, is this connecting to the people that we're trying to reach?
Yeah, and it makes you question the whole purpose of the church. If we are just meeting together, inside our four walls, and I remember being invited to a certain church that was celebrating 150 years of being in the same building, and they were excited about it. They'd never planted a church, they'd never gone out from that church. Generations had come and gone, and in one way, you could say, hey, they're faithful. They've been there for 150 years. And yet there was this dying within it. And there was this lack of relevance that just sort of meant they existed. The church was never designed to exist, but to thrive behind enemy lines. We were designed, when
Come on.
Jesus came, he came to go behind enemy lines. That's what he did. That's why he was always like in trouble. They were always trying to kill him. He didn't come and sit in four walls and stay in a place that, I know, people were just going to agree with him. He came into a culture that he stepped into, and he was relevant through his parables, through his
Yeah.
storytelling, and meeting needs of normal people, meeting people who were outside what they seemed as the religious people. And he hung out with them, and we know he got into trouble because he hung out with the sinners. And that, where do you find the sinners? In the place where sinners hang out. And this is like relevance. This is Jesus who is relevant. He was stepping
Brilliant.
in, and it caused the religious to be upset because it's like, no, that doesn't fit with our parameters and the way that we've designed, that you have to come to our thing. Whereas Jesus, he didn't come to anything. He went out. He went
Very
out
good.
to reach.
Yeah.
He went out to the people in need, and he says, doesn't he, that I haven't come for the people that are well. I haven't come for the healthy. I've come for the sick. And relevance
I love
has
it.
to be a suitable answer to the people that are sick. So, if we're just meeting together in our place
Yeah.
and saying, hey, we're here for the next 100 years, but we haven't really impacted our society, our world, there's big questions got to be asked, and it will all come down to relevance.
Right.
So that's what's in our heart. Freedom is, and you've never arrived at being relevant, church, because as soon as you think you're relevant this year, you're probably not relevant next year, because there is this
Yeah.
massive thing. Think about the way that when I was building church at the beginning, we didn't really have the World Wide Web. It was like, you didn't have mobile phones. We speak to people with cords on the end of phones, and you had to sort of actually go and knock on someone's door to make an appointment. It was like, I think just in the years that has changed with the impact of
Yeah.
the internet and social media, well, the church, like, the world is changing so fast currently with all that sort of IT stuff, and yet the church often can get itself so stuck in, somehow it gets stuck in the, in what we've done as a tradition, and we then lose the meaning of it, and we get disconnected from the world we're in. We need to be ready to change as the church, constantly, every year, ready to change, so we can
Absolutely.
be a voice to our world.
I think you've done a brilliant job in leading us in that, G. And I just even I just think about some of the ways that you dressed over the years, and there was something about you were gonna be relevant. And I'm thinking of the purple combats. Do you remember your purple
Oh
combats?
my goodness.
They were
I was hoping you would
incredible.
mention them.
But there were some outfits, and I think in their time they were cool. The purple combats were pretty awesome. But there were a few things over the years, isn't there? Just even like the way we dress, the way we connect. Is it going to alienate people, or is it going to bring them closer? And even that whole thing of you talking about how Jesus would tell parables, the Pharisees were interested in theological and intellectual conversations, and Jesus is there talking about sheep.
Yeah.
Jesus is there talking about going fishing. Jesus is there talking about planting seeds, just relevant to the people that he was actually trying to reach, not getting drawn into high and lofty conversations around these things and almost pitching things at that level, even though Jesus was the most theological, intellectual, advanced person to have ever walked planet Earth, and yet he made everything that he was trying to teach relevant to the people. And if Jesus did that, how much more should we? And yet Christians all around the world, they want to get drawn into high intellectualism, or they want to get drawn into doing things that please the church or please their own preferences. But I think being relevant is all about reaching the lost, isn't it?
Yeah, and as soon as you start reaching the lost, you have sort of people that are coming in perhaps to your church that are not the church people that other church people want to see always. They have their sheep that might have a bit of disease, they might have been through some difficulties, they might be broken. And it is amazing how that religious thing doesn't want that in church as much because it disturbs your world. And I think if you're going to be a relevant church, part of the fruit of that, it should be disturbing the world that you're in. Because if
Mm,
you if you tailor make it to the people that we like and the class that we like and the way that it fits, you're missing something. Because that relevance is what Jesus was doing, was he was reaching into the lepers, the sick people, the poor people, the people who had a notorious reputation, the tax collector. I mean, think about it. Like, you wouldn't invite those people to church. They were
mm.
not like the people that you'd want to hang with. And yet, even today, in our churches around the world where we, build church, we want to be a place where we're seeking to be relevant to the people that are not yet part of us. We're not looking at just, I don't, keeping the people who are already saved happy. Everything that we've got to have about us is being relevant to our time, is reaching the lost, because that's what the purpose of the church is that we really are a gateway for those that are lost, that are diseased, that are broken, to find hope and to find the one who saves them. And so relevance has to be at the forefront.
Come on. And I think about, G, how this was one of the big burdens for you in the kind of early 2000s, was about how our church on Sunday, the way it was feeling and it was coming across, was not the picture of relevance that you had a burden for. Do you want to just give us a bit of
Yeah.
almost, context about what that looked like at the time, and what you were feeling and thinking and the convictions that you were having about church?
Yeah. As a young man, I built church really based on the model that I'd seen previously,
Right.
from the people that had done it around me, because that was the only way I could really see it and learn. But as we journeyed sort of probably, I don't know, 7, 10 years on, we were looking and just thinking, there's got to be more than this. And as we sort of went forward, we started becoming critical of what we built. And
Right.
although we had a gathering of people and perhaps we had a good time and we were praying for our town and we were seeking to reach out, we really were. We had gospel night Sundays where you'd invite someone in, and we saw some response, but we weren't happy because we were looking at what we built. And then uh, we came to a
Gee,
place.
can I just
Yeah.
say that the Gospel Night Sundays, we had some really good ones, didn't we? We also had some really bad ones.
Terrible.
I remember in our Leinster days, we had there was this idea. It was like, why don't we get each small group to take hold of a Gospel Sunday? You're responsible, run with it, organize it, come up with the ideas, the vision. And so this one Sunday, it was one of our small group leaders, and he was running the night, and he had this idea: why don't we throw everything up in the air, mix it all up. We're going to get everyone on different roles and doing different things so that we are going to get. So the small group leader went behind the sound because I never do sound. So why don't I go and do the sound? And then we had the guy who usually does the acetates, who puts the words up for everybody on the projector, on the overhead projector. He had never done it before, and he was putting them on upside down and back to front. And I remember being there because I used to do it. And it was not only, he'd realized it's upside down, so he changed it, but it was still back to front as well. So we had to change that, and it was just complete confusion. Then we had someone leading worship who had never led worship before, and let's be honest, they could not sing, and they had their arm in a sling. So it's just quite a funny scene of just someone who can only raise one hand because the other arm is broken, and their voice is also not broken, or something's going on there. It was bad, and it was just quite the scene. And I think then there was also a dance by someone who liked to dance. And I think that when you're in freedom now and you think about, like, hopefully we put on around the world an amazing event for you to bring people to, it's not always been the case. And that was one
No.
of our most maybe car crash Sundays, wasn't it?
Josh,
But
they also had, I'm pretty sure it was that one, they
oh
decided
dear,
to
we were
do
all scarred.
Sister Act, the scene
Yeah.
when they dress up and they put bin bags on to be nuns, and they stand up there and do this song. It was at this point of the evening that I
What was
had
that?
to
He's
consider,
my guy,
yeah,
talking about
and,
my
and I had to
guy.
think, do you know what? Maybe it's time to hang up being a pastor and go home.
Do you know, I
I was
brought
that
someone
close
that
to
night, G.
thinking,
I brought someone non-Christian.
how am I gonna recover from this? It's like, you're looking, thinking we've reached the depths here.
Yeah,
So
it doesn't get
it
any
it's
worse.
so true. That was one of the examples of trying to release people, trying to raise people, given them some authority, perhaps too much authority, to go and do something.
You're a very
And
releasing leader.
And guys, we can talk on this podcast about leadership stuff and all those things, but it's taken some years, and often
To
it's
learn some
actually
lessons.
the wrong things have taught us big lessons. So
Definitely.
yeah, coming back to it, I became a bit of a critique of what I built. As you can, it's no surprise, is it? I had this reality moment of sitting down, and I think I remember writing 15 different things of what was wrong with the church I built.
Oh my
Can you
gosh.
imagine it? Right from the building we were in, because we were in like an old hall. That from the outside, it just looked pretty. I don't know, a little bit what's going on there, and wondering why people struggle to come through the door. From our worship, that at the time I think it was 50 minutes, plus
Wow.
sometimes. Some songs, how I used to do those old songs on repeat for 10 minutes, the same song with a bit of
They
flag.
were like singing "I Could Sing of Your Love Forever," and they were really
It really
trying.
was forever.
It
It's like,
was forever.
when is someone going to pull the plug here?
Oh
And
my
and
gosh.
then a few like flags being waved around that might take your head off. And this was, you were starting to look at it and start to look at also the messages. I'd been teaching on stuff, that again I looked at and I thought, is this relevant? Is it, people I think were enjoying it. The Christians were enjoying it because it was like some great, this is the Hebrew for this and this is the Greek for that. And we're going to look at David's, sort of ark and all that, this type of stuff. I suddenly had this wake up call when I looked through the whole thing. I thought, we're trying to, even the name of our church was back then when we started was called New Life Christian Fellowship. And you imagine, I
Wow.
looked at it, so what does that even mean to someone that doesn't know Jesus, who is unchurched? And as you know, Josh, we're more and more part of a world, especially in the UK, that is unchurched. So when you meet people, some people haven't really heard of certain Bible characters. They've never heard of
Yeah.
Elijah. They don't. They know a bit about David and Goliath, maybe, but people haven't. They haven't been to Sunday school, and so this huge shift that has changed, and we're trying to be a church that reaches the an unchurched generation. Brought me to this point of we got to have some radical change. So I had my big list, and I just thought I don't want to waste my life just carrying on with my head in the sand, keeping people happy because people were quite happy in our church. But we had a nice little cuddly gathering of Christians. I wanted to reach the world. And although I didn't know it, I was just trying to reach my town at that point. I knew inside of me there was something more, that God had called me for more, and this wasn't it. And first of all, God said, well, it starts, if you want to be relevant, it starts with putting things to death. And that means finishing some things.
Yeah.
It means like deciding to do things new, giving up old ideas. And that's really how freedom, these were almost like the beginning of the germination of relevant church that was to become freedom.
Mm.
And what we ended up then putting the building up for sale, because I thought the building's a barrier. It's not helping. It doesn't speak of relevant church. It was like an old building, few hundred years old, that sort of smelt old. And you come in, and yeah, for church people, it was like, this is nice and churchy. And it's
Yeah,
hilarious
a nice little
now.
stained glass window.
Yeah, we had lots of that. And it's hilarious now because we then went on this big journey, didn't we? And it started by us traveling from that town, from Leominster, to go and do church, our outreach to the lost, in a pub called the Herdsman in Hereford. So we decided we're going to get up. We had a special trailer made with our equipment, and you and Rose were part of this, of like mobilizing mainly our young people. We're going to go and rent this room at the back of a pub, this dingy pub, and we're going to put on what we thought was relevant church. And that, again, these were the seeds of starting to, come on, we're going to push some boundaries here. We're going to do some things different.
We did. We started trying out a few things, didn't we? And seeing how it goes. But I remember, G, before that, you'd had a real conviction about media, and I think again, like honor and respect to you as a leader for this, because you invested a lot of the church budget probably for the year. I think it was about £5,000. And we didn't have loads of money, but you went and bought a camera, bought 2 Apple Mac computers, and I don't really think you were even using a computer yourself at your business at this point in time.
Yeah.
So it's like you were hardly using a computer yourself, but you knew we need media to go forward. And this is when we were still in Leominster. This is when we were like New Life Church. This is 2004. And you bought us this equipment and you were like, hey, figure it out. And I think that, like, we didn't even know what we were doing. We didn't know how to use the stuff. We didn't even know we could make videos. But the seeds that were planted there would then grow into very significant ways for us to be able to do video church. Just within 6 years of that, we were broadcasting out
Yeah.
online. And then 7 years, we started our first video campus in Cardiff. But if we hadn't have started then, wouldn't have learned all the lessons we'd need to learn to be able to get ready. And I think that one of the things of building relevant church is that it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. Good,
It's like
Josh.
you've got to have the vision for it and almost be willing to go on the journey, to risk some discomfort, to risk some challenge and some things that are against preferences, and say we're going to be open. It's just even like we've created albums and sound that's come out of the Freedom Church House over these last 10 years, which have been amazing. But it started out with a young band that were very different to what we were usually having on a Sunday. That, yes, they were perhaps more relevant and more connecting, but it was also very uncomfortable and
Yeah.
against the flow of what else was happening. And out of that came albums where we've
Yeah.
had, for some, over 1 million plays
Yeah.
of songs that have gone around the world. it's just amazing how God's used that. But it started with having a vision for relevance that's going to connect in a far greater way, but that's actually going to be against some people's
Yeah.
preferences. It's going to turn over a few things that are settled and actually unsettle things and cause a bit of a disturbance. But that's what then led to being able to make relevance. Relevance doesn't just happen like
Yeah.
that. It's actually having a vision and then being willing to pay the price to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think relevance is almost like a seed that grows and it develops.
Mm,
It becomes something, and you have to sow into it. As you say, it doesn't look that much at the beginning, but you've got to keep sowing into it. And people will doubt it and they won't even see it. They won't be able to get the idea of it. But you've got to keep sowing, because it takes a period of time to almost start establishing itself. I
hmm
mean, the very first technology that we invested in was actually a projector, a digital
Digital
projector. It
projector,
was
yeah.
quite a big, machine, but it was probably one of the earliest projectors. And we went from using an overhead, acetate projector to this digital thing. Back
I
then, it was something
remember it.
like two
It
thousand
was
pounds,
amazing.
which was like just a
Yeah.
huge amount of money. And we we actually had a family in the church who ended up leaving our church because we bought the digital projector. And his argument was, I can't believe you wasted that amount of money when that money could have gone and supported missionaries. And obviously, I turned around to him and said, actually, do you know, we didn't buy the projector. Someone actually bought it as a gift in our church. But if you go in and said, you know, I think there's going to be something else you'll be unhappy with. But that was an
Quite right.
example. That was our very first bit of, do you know, we need to switch from doing the old way into what's happening in our world. And that was what's happening, this digital revolution. And then, as you said, we started thinking media, that started thinking, okay, I don't know how a computer works, but I know Josh, my son, he's just got this, he's the generation that is going to use this. And that's why we invested. So it's not only just sowing, you've got to invest. And I think some people, churches you want to be relevant, but you don't really want to invest too much in it. And you don't want to almost upset the way it was done before, because we so easily get stuck in, oh, we've done it this way and people aren't going to understand
Yeah.
it. But you're going to have to take the risk of that, because when you being relevance is involved with being a creative, having a creative
That's
mind,
good.
being creative, of seeing what sort of can be from where you are. Not everyone sees it. In fact, going further than creativity is prophetic. Prophetic is actually calling into being what God is like, where God is
Yeah,
taking
that's
us.
good.
It's in the future. That's part of creativity. So I'm investing in this, but you can't quite see the fullness of it. And we got to be a creative, prophetic church for the time that we live in, listening what the Holy Spirit is saying, all of the time having this very clear line that we do not change our message. It's sacred.
Mm,
We've never ever come to the place of thinking, oh, perhaps water this down. No, in fact, we have a very strong gospel that we will not, and the word of God, we will not water down. It's relevant in every situation. But again, the religious people saw relevance, us becoming more relevant, as that we were watering down God's word. But when I challenged that, they had no proof of it. It was more that we were
mm.
watering down religious practice. Very different
Oof,
thing.
come on. And G, obviously, we made a lot of changes to the church. We started using media. We updated our worship. We, uh, you changed some of your preaching style, and just looked at what you were teaching and how you were teaching it. And we kind of did all these things, whether it was worship, with some of our visual side, even the name of the church, the brand of the church, so that it would connect. And I think that the huge thing about relevance is you've got to keep thinking about where you're going and who you're connecting to that's not there yet,
Yeah.
rather than, I think that the draw and the trap is always that we can fall into building and connecting with those that are already here. And I think that's how you go from being relevant to being religious,
Yeah,
is by you start to take your eyes from looking outwards and you start to look inwards.
yeah,
And when you do that, that's when I think you can start to get into some of those things. And I think even for us as leaders, G, that we've spoken about over the years, is we have to keep practicing being relevant.
yeah,
If we're still playing the same, what was relevant in the mid 2000s is not necessarily relevant now, and that we need to keep empowering young people. We need to keep inviting the next generation to shape what is going to make. For me, I was the person making others uncomfortable, maybe in the mid 2000s, and there'll be someone that's going to be coming along now in the mid 2020s and go, oh, that's not really my kind of thing, but it's what people need now.
yeah.
It's the sound of this generation. And I think that we almost have to keep having that discipline. We having those keep conversations, don't we, that it's not about what we just like as leaders, but we're going to continue the pursuit of
Yeah,
relevance.
because we gravitate to what we know.
Yeah.
That's why its relevance is always a challenge, because we just comfortable with knowing this is how it's going to work. This is what we like. These are the ways we like to worship, etc., etc. And so people get stuck in those moments, and they don't want to change, because as human beings we like to stay in the position of control to do that, and things don't move on, new ideas don't come out. And then you see people, and there are churches that you can go into and you think, wow, where's the younger generation, where's the families gone? They're almost stuck in the 90s, because that leadership would have somehow decided we can't risk losing what we have. And as we're pushing forward, no, we want to, we want to stay where we are. They pay this great price of the future generations. And that, in a way, that's the way church
So sad.
happens and has happened for probably centuries, where they have this sort of time where it's relevant, and then they cease to be relevant, and then they all hold on to it, and they try and rearrange the furniture. But you can still rearrange the furniture on the Titanic, but it's still sinking. And people come up with, they come up with like, hey,
Wow.
let's do a new program. Let's maybe do Alpha. Fantastic. We use Alpha, fantastic. But just bringing in another program into a church,
Mm,
it's like changing the furniture. If you're not
yeah.
relevant, probably the ship in the coming years, it's actually
Man,
going down.
that's so
It's
true.
not going forward.
Because we've had that over the years, I think, where churches have perhaps come alongside us or asked us questions where it's like, hey, we'd like to do this. And it's like, you can do that practice if you like, but if you don't change your posture and your heart and the infrastructure and the vision, and you just try and change the fabric, it's not going to work. And we've seen the fruit of that, really, where people must try and put on or try something different,
Absolutely.
but without that change of heart,
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Um, Gee, just to finish up, I was just wanting to just zero this down to make this relevant, if you like, to the average person listening to this. We've almost been talking about it on a church building level, but what does it mean for someone that is being relevant to our time on an individual and personal level? Like, how can people apply this who are maybe listening in today?
Are you talking about the way that they would live their Christian life?
Yeah, live their Christian life. Like, what does relevant to our time mean to live it out, not just in the way that we build church, but that we are as people being a part of church? How does that impact us, that principle? A way that have you got any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
well, I think the way that we meet as a church is one thing, but each of us are out there in the marketplace. We're out there in our work with our friends, and that relevance is so important about the way we communicate. What and who we are as Christians. And this is where I think sometimes you might see the street corner preacher who, certainly doesn't get a lot of result because it's like an old method. But relevance really for me, I think, works how we get alongside people on their level, just as Jesus did. And so much of it comes out of actually caring for people. When people know that you care, they're going to be ready to listen to what you actually know. And I think that's a big key thing. But like Mother H is brilliant at this. I'd say how relevant she is that she can be relevant to a young mum in a grocery store by reaching out and just saying hello, asking about her little boy, and then engages in really sharing faith in a very down to earth level at where people are at, not with religious language,
It's really
not
good.
with sort of, Bible quotations necessarily, but literally just saying, do you know what? I've got something. I've got the good news. This is what the gospel is. I've got good news about this. And it's almost like looking, you have to look to connect. I think you said this a few moments ago, Josh, is that you've got to connect with the people out there like a business. And I think a Blockbuster, the whole story of Blockbuster, I think used to do, was it videos and CDs? It was like a rental store, but they didn't really anticipate the change that one day people weren't going to go in and rent a little package.
Yeah.
And because of it, they ended up, all their stores, they were so successful, but they were trying to keep what they had instead of growing into the relevance of, downloads and, online. And it's similar for us as individuals, the church. We've got to be a people that are ready to connect with people where they're at. So you've got to think, how can I connect with this person? What's important to
It's
them?
really, yeah, it's
It's
good.
not about me getting my message over so I can get another scalp. I've got someone said the prayer. It's actually about connecting with people. And we know that there are so many customers out there who are lost. Just in the
That's
UK,
right.
what
There's no shortage of lost
95%
people.
people don't know, Jesus, and so we've got lots of customers. We know that there is a need, so it's down to us as individuals, and this is what I want to encourage people. What you have just in your connection of showing that you care, somehow connecting into where their life is at, and presenting Jesus in a very real way that's the key. That's relevance. How can you take this Jesus that we know is so relevant to our world? How can I communicate him to the single mum, to
Definitely.
the guy I'm laboring with at work on the building site? How can I, when he starts talking about another broken marriage, how can I talk into that? And it's having the
Yeah.
language. See, in scripture, we obviously have the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and one of those, the gift of tongues, the gift of interpretation. But I want to also broaden that and just say, do you know what? The church, we as individuals should, I believe, we should have the gift of interpretation. We should be able to interpret the mess of people's lives with the gospel of Jesus. And
It's really
maybe
good.
you've been through divorce yourself, and God saved you, but you went through divorce, and you know the pain of divorce, but you also know the Savior. You can interpret the pain of others who come across your world, and you can signpost them to Jesus. And if it's through loss, losing a loved one, if it's through loneliness, depression, if you're a believer, these are the things that are very real to people out there, and people are looking for answers. Well, you can have this gift of interpretation, which is what Jesus was. He was
Come on.
interpreting the pain of the world and saying, I've come to make
That's
it well.
brilliant.
And I think that's how you got to see it when you go out. It's like seeing, look, there are people, and every one of us have a journey and have an experience that we can translate. And it's not through, we know it's not through bashing them over there with the Bible. It's not through being superior. It's through loving them, getting on their level. And it's through somehow making a connection to say, do you know what? There is hope. Do you know what? I'd love to be able to pray for you. Do you know what? Jesus does care. And I think that is like a relevance on a down to earth level.
Great. Come on. And I think that when you boil it down, relevant to our time, it's all about connecting to the lost, isn't it? That's
Yeah,
what we're so intent on doing. And I think that's where you and H have led us so well over the years. I think one of the other ways that people can live this out personally is just for that next generation to come and help shape those warrior poets, to come and bring their giftings and their talents, their ideas, their vision to shape what's next, write new songs,
yeah,
come up with new ideas, come up with design, whatever it might be, help us move into what's next for this decade, for this season that's going to connect on another
yeah.
level, because we need to keep innovating, keep persevering, keep rushing after relevance so that we always stay connected to what God wants to do through reaching the lost
Amen.
people. So, G, thanks so much for your time today. I hope this has been helpful, everybody listening in on this today, and that you can think about, how am I being relevant? How am I doing that on a Sunday? Why are we doing this in church? If that's sometimes against my preference, or I didn't really like this song, or I didn't like this style, letting that go, because we know there's a vision behind it. It's
Yeah,
not actually about our preference and what we want. It's about reaching the lost. And this is perhaps going to
yeah.
connect to someone that's
Josh,
different from you.
perhaps I'll just add this as well before we finish. Is we obviously have salt winds, in our church, which is this vision, of creativity to, to really take this message, relevance to the gospel, through the media, through
Mm,
creativity in all different forms, and it that's all to do with relevance. It's, so when we do creativity, it's not just because we want to do a great spoken word, a great video, some, I don't know, whether it is a dance or something. It's actually this relevance, this
yeah,
thing of reaching, connecting to people. That's why we're doing it. And also within it, there is a real important part is humor. I think that there's something about having fun in church, because when I
definitely.
meet a lot of people who are unchurched, and they maybe come to church or they come round to our house, we invite them for a meal, and they come round and they see that we're normal. They have, so many people out there have a weird idea of church is boring,
Yeah,
it's not relevant, and that you do and don't certain things. So when they come around and think, oh, you're actually really normal. Yeah. When they come to church,
yeah,
and we have, just this past Sunday, we had some real humorous video and some different things about the lost sheep and stuff. Some religious people might be thinking, what's this to do with the gospel or to do with church? Do you know what? It's all connected. Because what we do is, we had non-believers there that morning, and they were saying, I just loved it. It was so much fun. I love the fact that it's just like family. You come in and it was like so enjoyable, and then that prepares them for the message. It prepares them for worship, and so, again, I just want to mention that, because I'm sure some of our guys, if you're more from a religious background, you might be thinking, why do we use a lot of humor, and is that right in church? Do you know what? This is actually about us connecting with people,
come on.
because people want to come in and they want to go out saying, wow, church isn't just thought provoking and life changing, but it's fun. There's joy in God's house. And that's what we want to build. We want to build something that impacts people and they love to be a part of it.
Absolutely right. So hope that helps, and hope you can apply that to your life. And we will be back with another episode next week. Thanks for joining, everybody. Thank
See
you,
ya.
G.